Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Pound, awards editor at TheWrap. Thank you for joining us for today's award season screening of NOTTURNO, which is Italy's entry in the Oscars Best International Feature Film race, and also an entry in the Oscars documentary category. We'll start by showing the trailer to the movie, and then we'll go right into a conversation with director Gianfranco Rosi. To our audience, please participate in the live chat, share your thoughts about the film, let us know where you're watching from. To begin with, here's the trailer for NOTTURNO. Welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce director Gianfranco Rosi. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for just a beautiful and powerful film. I mean, your last film, which was also Italy's Oscar entry, was Fire at Sea, which was set on one small island of Lampedusa. This one takes place across a huge stretch of territory all across the Middle East. So what led you from this small location to expanding like you did in this one?
To this, I showed it to you before this map, to this incredible territory. I have to show this map always because that's where the film started and that's where the film took place, from this little island of Lampedusa, where somehow it was for me impossible to have real encounter with the people that were arriving from the world we saw on this map, out of conflict, war, violence, death, and escaping and facing the sea and death in the Mediterranean Sea, and arriving with hope in this island of Lampedusa, where unfortunately they were spending only 1 day, 2 days, and then they were displaced in the rest of Europe. So what I always felt was missing in that film was like going close to the story of the people I was meeting in this center of this island. This was the gate of Europe, and these were like somehow politicians and politics betrayed the hope of these people. So for me, it was a natural step after I finished the film to go and see that reality. And of course, I confronted myself with a huge territory, with these borders that somehow they were confined in layers of stratification of memory, of different culture, different languages. And there was a huge impact. And it took me 3 years somehow to find a way, informing somehow, yes, all this border that then at the end of the film, in the editing of the film, I decided to take it out, So the film somehow, it became like a mental place, became like a place of the mind. It became I just gave myself to the story and to the people I met in all these years, canceling somehow the difference setting between a country and another country, and try to find stories that somehow were universal and that they were bringing us into a very strong intimacy and in a very strong intimate element. And I was in places of war where the war was always there, was always present. The echo of the war was always there, and somehow understood in all this year that place of war had consequences, had a long range of consequence, like a shock wave that reaching people much farther than where the war was happening. And that's somehow what is the film. I know that it's not easy to answer the audience. There's a sense of displacement when you watch the film. You never know where you are. You go from one story to another story. But I think if the audience have the patience to go till the end, they will have more answer than if I will declare where I was, or if every of the character would somehow give answering question, which I never did throughout these years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, aside from one card at the very beginning of the movie that sort of, gives us a sense, it's never really established where we are or exactly who we're watching. Why was it important for you to do that?
Well, this is something that happened, of course, in the editing process. When I was there, I didn't have in my mind any script. I didn't have a story in my mind. I spent 6 months. I work as a one-man crew. I do sound and the camera myself. And I had an incredible support from local producer, and I met incredible people that they became my assistant in every single region where I was shooting, in Lebanon, in Kurdistan, in Syria, in Iraq. And we are always two people crew, my assistant, the driver, and the somehow translator, and myself. So at the beginning, the first 6 months, 8 months, I spent it without the camera there. And I created in this map, that many maps that I have that are part of the work, these absolutes, these places that somehow were important to go there. These were places that were destroyed by the ISIS regime, and somehow touched by the ISIS tragedy. And after 6 months, I encountered the story that are in the film, basically. And only after this period of searching, I was able to film. And when I started filming, I didn't know where the film was taking me, because I was going from one story to another story to another story. And I spent there two years without even watching the footage. So everything was like in my mind. Everything was discovered inside the camera. And everything was discovered by accident, because all the stories somehow had an incredible encounter, which was never predicted, which was never announced, which was never scripted. Everything was an accident, and then a necessity became, everything happened by accident. And then in the moment they happened, it became a part of the story, a part of the narration. So this border that somehow are the symbol of division and the symbol of conflict, for me became a way of encountering people, and just let myself transport from one place to another place. And working there, you have to know when to arrive and when to leave. So most of the time, after a few weeks I was in a location, I had to leave and go somewhere else, because my presence was becoming dangerous I was becoming a target very easily there. So all the thing was built and back and forth. But the story was always there. It was always the same story I met. It was the first encounter that I had. The story of the telephone, the story of the hunter, the story of Ali, the story of the mother. There were stories that I encountered without having the camera, and then when I went back to them, they became a part of the narration, and they became this long journey that sometimes it took me 3 years to find a sense to an encounter. For example, I encountered this phone in one of my first journey in Rojava and Kojo, and I was there filming this ruined place, completely destroyed. It looked like an archaeological site, like Pompeii. These ruins completely. You ask yourself how this is happening. This was just when ISIS left the area, and this was the area where more than 5,000 women that were taken prisoner by ISIS and became a sex slave. And when I was filming just this ruin, I was approached by this man. He was 22, 23 years old. And he told me the story about the wife that was kidnapped. The whole family was kidnapped. And he had no news. But he said, I have only recorded that my wife was sent it to the mother. And he invited me to his house. And there's this phone with all these messages. I didn't know the language. I was just listening this voice of desperation of this young woman being kidnapped and trying to sneak this phone call and trying to make this. Sometimes they were whispering, sometimes they were crying, sometimes they were hunger. And I didn't know what to do with this phone. I filmed just this phone in the dark with this hand. I was a husband at the time. And then in these 3 years, I went back to the story many times. And I didn't know how to film it. Till the last encounter I had with this young man, he told me, Gianfranco, I don't want to do anything anymore with this story. I don't want to be filmed. But the mother of my ex-wife, now she lives in Germany. And I give you her phone number and maybe you can meet her. So I had this phone with me. And after I finished the film, this was the first encounter I had. And after 3 years, before the pandemic started, I go to Germany. It was the 24th of February, 20th of February of exactly 1 year ago. And I'm in Germany in this house, completely. And this woman was liberated she escaped basically by ISIS, and this NGO brought her to Germany. And she had other 2 daughters with her. And she told me these incredible, horrible stories, and I was there. I spent from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At the end, I say, I have to leave here. I cannot film anything. And she told me, but you have a phone with you. And in this phone, there is messages of my daughter. I said, yes. I said, well, you're doing a documentary, so you want to film this. I said, are you willing to do that? He said, yes, I have to do that. And I look around, and there's this little room there with the blankets that were exactly the same blanket I used to film when I was in my location, the blankets of the kids, the blankets that I met in all these houses. And I recognized something that was very close to me. And I enter in this room, I put down the camera, she sit down on this sort of bed, she opened the phone and she started listening to these messages. And I just filmed from one angle all that. And at the end, this 2-story encounter after 3 years, this was my first encounter, the phone. And after 3 years, I was able to film in this room, the mother listening to the daughter. And we don't know what's happening to her. Still, she's under ISIS. ISIS is growing up again, unfortunately, with the pandemic. The last contact she had was last November with the daughter, and it was a message. And she doesn't know if she's alive right now or not. But, there are 2 shots only. And these 2 shots took 3 years to somehow encounter. And this is somehow it's important to me because making film for me is about subtractions, about taking off information. It's about missing things. It's about spending time till the right things happen. And what before Kochanowski was talking in the previous conversation we had just half an hour ago, he was talking, I wrote here in my notes, the essence of truth, and that's what we have to do as filmmakers, to find that essence. That's something that is so profoundly intimate, that becomes the essence of life or the essence of truth. And this is my duty as a filmmaker first, and as a documentarist, because I do consider myself a documentarist, because what I have in front of me is absolutely real, and I have to use the language of cinema, and yet the knowledge of what I have in front of me is life, and it has that essence of truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you often spend a lot of time waiting for the right shot, the right thing to happen, and then end up not shooting anything?
Yeah, all my film have been like that. For my first film, Boatman Below Sea Level, they've been all years, except one film that I did was like an instant movie, which is called Sicario Room 164, which I think is my favorite film. It took me 3 days of shooting and 1 month in Mexico and 5 days of edit and $5,000 budget. That was a perfect film I did. And still, I think I have to say one film I would take with me, Sicario Room 164, which is a film that very few people saw. And that was based on a story by Charles Bowden, who was one of the greatest American writers. And I think I was able to shoot that film because of his enormous knowledge. He spent 30 years of his life telling the story about cartel and the drug things between the United States and Mexico, and suddenly I had in front of me this killer, this Sicario. So that was my only film that took very, very little time. But all my movies are about the biggest resource that I have is time, you know, and that's why I have to work alone. Because when I work alone, I'm able to wait 10 days for the right light, or 2 weeks, or 1 month, or 3 years to have the right story happening. And if you work with the crew, this is impossible. You know? So to be alone, it allows me this intimacy and be able to build trust and this relationship. And with always the fascination to know that when you put down the camera, things change. You know, sometimes people say you are invisible. I'm not invisible. I have a big camera. I have a tripod. I have gear, sound, but somehow when you put down the camera, things change, and reality transforms. I change, and what is in front of me change, you know, and I have to find a language of cinema in order to tell the story, because the only way I can bring the audience by not giving information, because in my film there's very little information. You know, just at the beginning, people, they don't know physically where they are, geographically people don't know where they are. But if the audience have the patience to go through this frame and to go through this journey, which was my journey somehow, and they trust me enough, or they trust that what they see enough, I think at the end they can have all the answer they want in this film. And I think this is also a very strong political film in this cinematic way. You know, it's a political film. And it's a political film in an order of taking off information. Because we live in a world right now that there is so much information that I think the duty of us is like to find a way of telling a story by not taking people from the jacket, you know, and the audience. The audience has their own incredible maturity, and they know where to find their own answer. And that's what my challenge is in this film. And yes, I always take a long time to make a movie, and because simply I'm aware that making film is about missing things. You know, it's not about gaining things. It's about waiting. And then at the end, I know that what I didn't film or what I left out from those 2 hours are still part of that. You know, are still part of that narration. And it's all there. I remember when I showed my film Far at Sea, which is my previous film before this one. I showed the film to Bertolucci. He honored me with the Golden Lion in Venice. And when the film was going, Far at Sea was going in Berlin, he told me, well, I want to see if you deserve the Golden Lion. I want to see the film before you give it to Berlin. And he saw the film and he told me something very important. So in this film, I can see things that you didn't put in, and every frame contains something that you left out. And this for me was an incredible truth, and what I always carry with me. You know, like when I do compone a frame, I have to be able that this frame tells what is before and what is after and what is in my back. And this is the synthesis. That's what a great photographer does. You know, like there's one frame, one single frame, and in that frame there is a before and after, and what is in the back of the camera. And the same way when we film is the process of moving images. When this frame, I have to have a narration that goes from A to Z and has to have a storytelling. Every frame has to tell storytelling, and that frame somehow I have to move and be able to leave the audience there and be part of this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you can do that.
Yeah, I mean the compositions in a lot of cases are just amazing. I mean the you know, what you're showing us is you know plays out in these extraordinary settings. How long does it usually take you? A long time to figure out, okay, this is exactly where I want the camera to be aimed. This is what I want to frame in this picture. Because once you set it up, there's not a lot of camera movement. I mean, there's usually no camera movement. So how How difficult is figuring out exactly where to put the camera?
This happens because I put the camera only after spending a lot of time there. And every story is different. I spent with Ali, the kid, the kid that is forced to do all these jobs. I spent with him months and months with him. I spent with the hunter 2-3 months there with him. I spent in the hospital 3 months in the hospital, psychiatric hospital. I spent with the mother time. So when I start filming, I already know more or less what's happening in their daily life, except with the mother scene, which was completely improvised. At the beginning of the movie, these mothers are in the prison, going through these cells, which is an incredible story that too as a background. And there you understand a lot how I film and how I work. But so that was fast. It was like it happened in 2 days. That I met this woman. There was a celebration for the Kurdish. There was an annual of the Kurdish people at the border with Iraq, and I met these women there. They were there celebrating 50 years of liberation from the drama that Kurdistan went through there. And I asked her, and I said, I would like to film in this prison. And they told me this prison was a prison that I visited many times. I didn't know how to film because it was an empty space. It was a prison built by Saddam Hussein. And I spent like hours, days there. I said, how am I going to film that? And one day, by chance, I passed by there and I see people there. And I meet this woman. I say, I would like to film inside the prison. I said, no, we cannot film there. We were in this prison. We lost my husband, and then I was able to convince that I said, this is people that the world has to know about that, about what Kurdish people went through this, the betrayal of history that was there. And they accepted that. And for me at the beginning, I said, okay, well, how am I going to film? It was important that they were walking in this place, this abandoned place, and having this sound of the past. Because every room was filled of people that were killed. And when enter every room, when they're walking around, they were mourning. They were mourning the past. They were mourning the past. And I was just filming this walking. For me, that was enough. Then I said, maybe I'm going to put some sound that I found from old archival footage of prisoner being there. And then suddenly they enter in this room, and I'm there filming, and this woman, she started crying and moaning. There's this almost over dramatic expression of pain. And I start filming this. I moved the camera a little bit and I film. Then I went back because I have to keep a distance there. Then part of the women that were with her, they left, and she was alone. They're touching this wall. And then slowly I enter with the camera, and she was there feeling the body of the son. I didn't understand anything. I was just filming without understanding, but I knew that this was an incredible moment of truth again. And then she froze there, and then I left, and then she sit down and she showed me the picture of the son, and there's another moment with her. And that's it. This was something I never thought could have happened, and that's why I put this scene at the beginning of the film, because this scene somehow represent the fact that there's no border, there is no border in pain. The pain of those mother was the pain of the mother. It's a universal pain. And to put that scene at the beginning of the film, I declared that there's no borders anymore in the film. That it doesn't matter if you are in Syria, if you're in Kurdistan, if you're in Iraq. That pain of those mother is a universal pain, of that mother especially. And the all encounter I had were completely random and completely accidental. When I met the guy with the motorcycle, the hunter, I was going from Baghdad to the south to Basra, the south of Iraq, which is a place where 3 million people died during that war. That was another absolute I wanted to film. And then I meet this hunt at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It was extremely hot. It was like painful to do a huge journey from Baghdad to arrive there. Every checkpoint, you don't know if there was an ISIS checkpoint, it was a real checkpoint. And at the end, I see this motorbike passing there, and I turn, and I say, I want to meet this person. the way he was, his face, it was just 1 second. We turned, I asked my sister, let's go, who is he? He's a hunter. We go there, and we stop him, he stopped, and I said, I started asking him what he was doing. He said, I'm a hunter, and I go there at night, because at night, with the fire of the petrol, of the oil, I'm able to film, to shoot the birds. And they said, what do you mean with the fire? Yeah, everything is red, because there's this incredible landscape of fire. And that's where I go to hunt. And for me, this image stays in my mind for months. I took his number, and after 8 months, I went back to his house, and I said, I want to film you. And I spent there 2 months with him, going every day into this location. He was just waiting for the birds. That season, there were no birds anymore. So I just feel this man in a world that is upside down, a world that looks like to be Mars, in another planet, where you were surrounded constantly by shotgun, because there was a war there at the border. And this wait, this person just waiting for the bird to happen. And that's very simple. That was and again, it took months in order to arrive to that shot. But when I was filming, I'd say, okay, this is the metaphor of what I'm filming. This is this world that is burning and is going, and is a world that is upside down. It's a world that is that doesn't have rules anymore. And this constant sound of shotgun, which was always present there, was exactly the essence of the film. Was exactly the metaphor of the film. And that was a place where twice I was almost kidnapped there. And again, to have the permit to film there was extremely complicated. And always with the idea that I was also putting in danger the people that was working with me, my assistant. And he, after a few days we were there, he said, we have to leave. People know we are here. And then we leave, we go somewhere else, we spend a month in another location, then we go back there and try to go back to this marshland and film, till that frame is perfect, till that frame becomes like cinema, becomes something else, becomes a storytelling.
Yeah. There's also an extraordinary scene where you're in a school and these school children are showing the pictures they've drawn, basically of the atrocities committed by ISIS all around them. I mean, how do you get to the point where people are willing to show you things like that?
Again, this was the same location of the phone. I was trying to find a story related to the Yazidi women that were kidnapped, and there was no trace of that anymore. Everything was. These are the kids of the women that were kidnapped, and I end up in this orphanage. And again, I spent there like a month without know how to film this, and I would start going back and forth from Erbil to this story and I didn't know how to film. I didn't know how to put the camera there. Till one day, in one of my trips there, I found this teacher. And she was a psychologist, and she was doing a class for the first time. She was doing a class of drawing therapy with the kids. So I started filming this therapy. I filmed every single draw that you see in the wall there. And I spent a lot of time there till they finished this session. And this was becoming their own classroom. And the teacher was saying, it's important that all these drawing they did are there, part of their life. They're not just in their mind. Now they're out of their mind and they're there, and this is going to become their classroom. And there in that moment when the kids started giving the last touch to the things, I go close to these kids and he start talking about what he's seeing there. And again, I don't understand what he's saying. And he says something horrific. He says something that a kid should never say. And this became for me the room of confession, the room where history somehow is taking up, because this is the only witness that there is from the mind. There's no cinema, there's no camera, there's no picture about the horrific things that ISIS committed to this community. And everything we see is a result the mind of those kids that, you know, of course their life has been ruined forever. The poor kid that is startling in front of the camera there, he was not startling before, and he was like, after 3 years under the ISIS prison, he was again able to escape that. The mother was dead, the father was dead, and he escaped that atrocity. He's a kid that forever is gonna be, you know, signed by this horrific thing. So it was again very difficult to put that scene in the film, because I could have made a whole film there. I could have made a 2 hours film there. And again, for me, was finding the essence of that story, and to be able to go from one story to another story to another story, to arrive to that room was a very hard editing choice. But this somehow in the film was a point of arrival. It's a moment where, is it right to film that? I don't know. Is it right to put a camera in these kids that are telling this story, this horrific story? I don't know. But after going back and forth on the editing, I think it was my duty to bring this story out to the world, and to have this room. This was like a Nuremberger room somehow, you know. This was like the only witness that we have about these horrors. And of course, after that scene, there is the prison of ISIS in Kurdistan, where they were in prison there. And it's again 3 shots there. I spent another months there. Only 3 shots are part of the film. So making film is about subtraction and transformation. You know, like you have to transform everything in something else, because otherwise it's so complex what we see, that you have to create a latitude of interpretation for me to the audience, and leave the audience having their own thoughts at the end.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about another subject of your film. You told me once was the only talking head in the film is a horse that you encountered on the road one day.
A silence talking head.
So how did the horse come to be in the film?
Well, the horse, we are in Tripoli. By the way, this morning I was listening to the BBC radio. Tripoli is again on the total disaster. Tripoli is another absolute in Middle East. If you want to understand Middle East, you have to go to Tripoli. That's where everything happened. Tripoli is divided by this road, it's called Syria Road, and divide religiously 2 areas, the Sunni and the Shia, and Syria and the rest of the world. It's all in that road. Everything happened in that road. A revolution, all happened. When something is there, is everywhere in Middle East. And unfortunately now is again back. Syria Road is again a protagonist of history, and we are forgetting about, nobody's talking anymore about Middle East. This is another thing we should talk about. And I was there shooting a checkpoint. That checkpoint, it was very important checkpoint that was dividing this area. And finally I had the permit to film the checkpoint, and nobody was there. There was no military, there was nothing, there was no, and I had the camera there waiting. At a certain point I see this horse. And this was the same horse I filmed previous nights. They were doing this horse race in the empty city. It was like almost a pandemic city with nobody around anymore. And suddenly I turned the camera like this, and this horse is looking at me. And it starts this challenge, you know, I'm not moving, he's not moving. And this is a shot of 50 minutes, I think. And what was important there, again, the world was passing by around him. And I think he's like, there's a moment of truth that come there. It's like he's telling story there. He's like the oracle, the horse there. He becomes like an oracle, you know, like in the Greek tragedy. And this moment of interaction is so strong to me in the film that, of course, there's no sound, and I had to work on sound there. So we worked, that was a long editing sound, which was done on the post-production. At a certain point, I wanted to create this void of sound, this element of taking everything out of what's happening there. And then, boom, suddenly we are in the only love story in the film, in this couple on the top of this roof, still in Tripoli, that they are somehow flirting. And that was another incredible moment, because to be so close to a woman that is smoking and to be in the bedroom of someone that is a religious person, because then we see he goes out and chant Allah, was another moment of truth, to be close to this essence of truth in the film. But Tripoli was another important location. And again, nobody knows that that shot is in Tripoli, but at the end, it's not important for me, because that scene was only able to find it there. Like every scene, every story has its own essence in these places that it's been somehow, where the identity is being cancelled. This stratification of memory that is the border, this invisible border that is there in the film. Every shot that I was able to film somehow is linked to a location, and the person I met, or the story I met there, a very strong link into that person. So at the end, it's not important to say if I'm in Tripoli, or if I'm in Syria, or if I am in Iraq. And now this for me was a very difficult choice to do. When I showed the film to people in Iraq, in Syria, and the film went in Egypt, in this Arab World Film Festival. This was a choice that could have been very, unaccepted. But at the end, it was accepted, by the people that they saw the film, by the local people that saw the film. They said, this is the only film that somehow it tells exactly what this landscape is about, what this land is about, what this homeland is about. And the play that we are seeing in the psychiatric hospital is called Homeland. I wanted this to be the first title of the film, but then I discovered, someone told me that Homeland is a very successful serial. Homeland, yeah. But the play that I'm filming there on the Psychiatric Institute is called Homeland. Mm-hmm. That was like, where also in that play, there's no borders anymore, because they talk about Middle East, and they don't talk about Iraq, they don't talk about Syria, they call Homeland, which is the Middle East.
Right. Yeah. I mean, are you? I get the sense that you don't think of yourself so much as a documentary filmmaker as just as a filmmaker. I mean, are you thinking of this as being the documentary?
No. I always say I do documentary. I'm a documentarist, but when I film, I don't think I'm making a documentary or I'm making a feature film. But I totally believe that documentaries is something that give us an incredible range of experimenting, constantly. If you go from Flirty, which were completely poetry, like Nanook, it's an incredible film. You have like 15, all the whole families coming out from a canoe. It's completely surreal. And I believe that documentary and fiction, they came out at the same time. So I don't believe in this separation. And since my first film, I always wanted my film just to be a film. But using the language of cinema with a complete awareness that what I have in front of me is real. And I cannot manipulate what I have in front of me. I have to arrive to the essence of the story, because Ali is real. The mother are real. The psychiatric hospital real. It's not my invention. So I have the duty to respect the truth of what I'm filming. And so I am a documentarist, but I don't want to use documentary as a conqueror, of information, of moving the camera, like go right and left, and having this journey of it's so hard to make a documentary. I'm suffering here. It was so painful there, and becoming protagonist of this pain, like the filmmaker, the poor filmmaker that's been there, almost dead, and then he's showing something that we would never see somewhere else. And I try always to stay away from what I call explaining and complaining form of documentary. There's someone complaining and then someone explaining why they're complaining. And this is a form that I always wanted to go out. And I want documentary somehow to become an art form, like it was, like it was at the time of Flirty, like it was at the time of Rossellini, like it was at the time of De Seta. We have the most incredible cinema with De Seta, who is one of the biggest documentarists that live in the world. And unfortunately, very few people know his work. And I want just to use the language of cinema with the awareness that what I have in front of me have the weight of real life, and I have a responsibility of not cheating on that, of not manipulating that. And this is for me what is important. I have to arrive to the essence of the person I have in front of me and tell exactly who is he, like a portrait. And this is my duty, like, again, creating the essence of truth. And the essence of truth, we were discussing before in the panel we had with Konchalowski and Costa, is about POV, point of view. And point of view is it's a moral and ethical thing. When you put the camera there, it's a moral choice. When you put that frame, it's a moral choice, an ethical choice. That distance, to find the distance, it's a moral choice. And that's for me what is the truth in documentary, And I think by doing that, by putting one frame, I want to move out and having the audience to be part of this frame, and having the audience to trust me enough to go on this journey with me. And I think in this film, without asking any question, and there's no many answer in this film, I hope that every single person who see the film has a different answer, has their own answer and their own experience towards this journey, because it's a journey.
Yeah, well, it's an extraordinary film, and thank you for being here to talk about it. Thank you out there to everybody who joined us today. Be sure to take advantage of our free trial of TheWrap Pro to learn about upcoming Wrap screenings and events, or check our screenings page at screenings.thewrap.com. Gianfranco, thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
a powerful film and a great conversation.
Thank you.